Earlier in the making of a segment on this DVD, I said I was going to show some of the folder and partition organization on my own computer. I had to size the Windows Explorer down to 720 by 480 to get it to fit clearly onto what you could see onto a television. Normally, my screen is set to literally 3 times larger resolution, so I can see much, much more and don't have to scroll around left and right to see the different fields. But this is fine for these purposes, and hopefully it'll at least be clear. As I mentioned, I always keep my system drive with just Windows operating system and programs. There's no data on there at all. I back this up occasionally with Norton Ghost, and if I need to restore in 6 months for whatever reason, I can get back to exactly where I was, and I haven't lost any data. I'm not overwriting data. It also goes very quickly. This whole partition is, has about 10 gigabytes of stuff here. It's less than that. 7.8 gigs are used, so that doesn't take very long. I actually have a separate hard drive that you're not seeing here that's unplugged. It's inside my computer and has 3 partitions, so I can keep the last 3 copies of Ghost backups. Now, my data drive, this is what I call small data, and this just has base trap documentation in my accounting system and DreamStation software synth presets, and I keep a copy of Ellie's data from her computer. We back up to multiple places, including this computer. So it gets propagated around all the different backups, and I have funny things in GIF files and programming information and MIDI files and just all kinds of things here that are small and don't take up a lot of space, unlike audio and video files. I also have a temporary audio partition that's about 4 gigs, and it's in all the programs that create a lot of temporary files and then delete them, store their stuff here. WinZip is set up to store its things here. Vegas, you can see, has the redo buffer is here. SoundForge puts its temporary files there, and that way I don't care if it gets fragmented because the files get created and then they get deleted, and it's no big deal. And the same thing here with the web temp files. I have 2 different temporary internet files, folders for the different browsers I use. And I have a source partition. And this contains all of the programs I've downloaded or purchased. Anything that doesn't come on a CD or DVD, I save here, in drivers that I've downloaded for all of my computers. And sometimes I even keep things for friends' computers if they're not knowledgeable. I have the latest drivers of various sound cards that I don't even own, just to do that kind of housekeeping for my friends. My sound fonts never fragment. I haven't edited new sound font sample sets in probably a year, and I haven't created new ones, so I don't have to back them up often. And this is really a big part of the whole reason of organizing this way. The sound fonts don't fragment, so I don't have to back them up. I don't have to defrag. I can defrag my temp drive once in a while as needed. I keep mail and news separate. I always keep my last 3 to 4 months worth of incoming and outgoing emails so I can refer to things. And I have separate folders on this Ghost partition for Ellie's computer, my computer, the laptop in our living room. Actually, this is from my previous computer, which I still have. I actually ran out of space on one of my video drives, so I've been rendering the television DVD to here. I have about 10 gigs free on this partition, so it was a good place to stick it. I'll also mention I have 2 physical hard drives in my computer. One of them is drive C through M here, this audio back. And then another physical drive is N, O, and P. So when I want to back up my data, and I back up, as I mentioned, to many different places rotating, one of the places is to this local backup, and this has a backup of all the things from the first drive. So if the first drive physically fails, actually breaks, not just gets corrupted or something happens, but if it physically breaks, I have everything on this other drive. And so this is one of my backups in rotation. Audio and video are big partitions for all my projects, and I back those up back to this M partition, which is on the first drive. I don't have room for all of my video folders. This is a very, very big drive. But my current projects that I'm working on now, in this case, television, is backed up fully to here as well as to many other places. There are other drives that I have that aren't shown here. I have a number of FireWire and USB drives, really, really big ones, but I only turn them on when I'm actually using them. And that's pretty much it. Folders are named with meaningful names, and the sound fonts are organized by instrument category and data by, what kind of data it is. And I find that very, very easy. It's easy to find things. It's easy to know what needs to be backed up. Because the partitions are not humongous, it doesn't take that long to defragment them when needed. And this is just the way I like to work, and I find it very efficient. I'm using Microsoft Media Encoder 9 to capture the screen activity and recording the output of my Mackie mixer to my DAT recorder. This captures my microphone and also the audio output of Vegas. When I finish, I'll line up the captured video and audio manually in a new Vegas project. As I mentioned before, I had to set the total screen size to 720 by 480 to keep the video images clear enough to read on the DVD. And normally the working environment is quite a bit larger, and you can get many, many, many tracks. I can usually show 10 or 12 tracks at a time. There's also a video preview window, which you're not seeing here. That's a separate window, and I'll bring that over and slide that into place now and again as needed so you can see what's going on. Normally, I work with two different video monitors, a large widescreen Dell LCD and a smaller 17-inch conventional CRT monitor. So before we look at the various tracks in television, it might be useful to first present a general overview of video editing in Vegas. Vegas is very much like an audio DAW program, except you import video tracks that are usually shot with a camera. And many of the same features apply. Most video tracks that you import also have an audio track, but for a music video like this, that audio track is used only to sync up the video to the real audio, and then you can delete it. I'll also mention that video is based on frames. That's the smallest unit of time, and each frame is about 1/30th of a second. Also, there's a thing called keyframes, and these are fundamental to all effects animation and most things in Vegas that change over time if you're panning or scanning or zooming or whatever you're doing, or changing the color of something. And you can set a starting position and an ending position, and Vegas interpolates all the changes between those points. And we'll look at that as we get to this. Let's just create a really simple video here. We'll start with, let's use the banjo track here. And we'll bring this into Vegas, and you just literally drag it up to here. And I'm going to make these smaller just so that we can see what we're doing. And here is the video track of the banjo playing, and here's the audio. And if we put the cursor here, you can see on the preview window is me sitting there playing the banjo. And we're going to block out everything except for the green screen part, and then we're going to drop out the green screen. This will be very easy. But in order to have something to sync to, we need the audio. So there's this little Explorer window over here, and we go to the main television folder, and in there is television wave. So I'll bring that up to here, and we'll just start that right at the beginning. And now we need to find where the banjo comes in so we can sync that. And you'll notice that the audio and the video tracks move together. When you bring in a video file that has audio with it, the two are grouped, and you can separate them and you can ungroup them, and we'll do that maybe later. So I happen to know that this is the end of the rock part, and here's the quieter cello and piano, and the banjo comes in right around here towards the end of that section. So let's find where the banjo actually starts, right on the downbeat. There's a pickup note, but we'll start right with the downbeat. Well, that was pretty close. So it's right there. You can zoom in, and again, as I move the cursor, notice how it kind of jumps, and those are the 1/30th of a second frame. So that's pretty close to where it starts. And now, and I'm going to hit the M key just to put a marker there, and we'll name it banjo. And now let's get the banjo clip so that it starts right at the same place. And we now have to listen to that audio and find where the downbeat of that is, because the whole point of this is syncing this up in time so that the banjo comes in at the right place with the background music that's already been recorded and mastered. And you can hear, when I was recording this, I had my big speakers blasting all the way across the room, about 15 feet away, and playing very loud. So what you're hearing here is the camera's microphone picking up some of me. You can hear both banjos from, with the whole background music blasting out of the speakers, and also the banjo, the live banjo. So let's find exactly where that starts. We can make that one a little smaller and make this one bigger. Looks like it's right there. And maybe that, doesn't really matter. That's close enough for rock and roll. So now that's where the banjo is, and we need to move this over to this marker. So let's zoom in a bit, and we'll grab the clip there and move that. I'd say right about there is pretty good. So let's play the banjo. We still have the real audio muted. And now if we mute this and listen to the audio, so that's good. So now we can actually just delete this track. We don't need this anymore. We'll just delete this track from the project. And I'm going to go back a bit and bring the preview window into place. So now we've synchronized a video clip to an existing audio track. And we don't even really need this marker anymore, but we'll leave it for now. Now the next thing we need to do is to get rid of the green screen. But as you can see, the green screen is only part of the whole window, and we just want the little piece in the middle here. So the first thing we're going to do is use the pan and crop tool in Vegas to block out the background that we don't need. There's two ways this particular tool works. As you change the size of the screen, you can have the clip, the contents zoom to always fill the screen, but we don't want that. We want to truly use this as a mask. So we're going to say no to stretch to fill frame. And then as we move this, you can see it just literally pulls that in. And here's what the preview window looks like at the same time. So now we're done with that. Now the next step is to the green screen to drop that out completely. So that's done with plugins, and here's the plugin window, and we use the chroma key here. And this defaults to a pure blue. We're using pure green, and now this is what this window looks like. And you can see there's still a little bit of green, so we're going to have to adjust the thresholds. And I'm sorry that we can't. Maybe we can see both at once here. No, but there's a low threshold amount, and I'm just increasing that to the point where the background is completely dropped out. And you can see it's a little jaggy looking, and we can fix that also. That's an artifact that happens sometimes with green screens, especially if the lighting isn't good. And that's solved with the chroma blur. I'm going to insert this. This is showing all the plugins on this banjo track. And we're now going to insert the chroma blur. There we go. And I'm going to move this to be before the chroma key here. And the chroma blur, I already have a preset called Ethan. That's just kind of a medium amount of blur. And now you can see, at least I hope you can see, that it's much less jaggy. And of course we can put backgrounds in there, and I'm not going to do an entire project here for you, but we'll do just a couple more steps. So we can now make this smaller so we can fit more on here. And let's add a new video track. And I'm going to put this, since this is a background, I have to put this underneath the banjo. And that's how you determine what things are in front and what things are in back, is the track order. The tracks at the top of the screen are in front of tracks at the bottom. So I'll click here, right click, do it here, and insert a video track. And I'll just drag that. So now we have a new video track. And we can name the tracks, but this window is so small, we don't have room to show the track names. And I'm going to right click and insert generated media. And there's a bunch of things. One of the patterns they have is the checkerboard. And I use that a bunch of places. And there's some presets. And here's the default. Here's what you get. And I think that's fine for this purposes. And if we want the checkerboard to go the entire time, we just drag it over here. And of course you zoom in and move these in small amounts until they start exactly the same time. And that's close enough for now. There's also faders here that can fade in. Maybe I should make this a little bigger so you can see. And this just tells Vegas to fade in. It's very similar to the same thing in audio, but instead of the audio fading in, the video fades in. So if I hit play, I'll put the preview window there so you can watch. We can also change the composite level of the checkerboard, and that's like a little volume control. and that, I think it looks a little better. And if we wanted to move that, if we want to animate the movement of the checkerboard, that also is possible. Everything can be animated and moved and sized and changed, and that's done here with the track motion. And when we add track motion, here's a window I haven't resized yet, so let's resize it now. Make it about the same size. So here's one point, and here's another point, and we'll add a... So if we want to make the checkerboard start here and then rotate, which is one of the things I used, it stays the same here all the way through here, and then once it gets to around 10 seconds, 11 seconds, it's going to start to rotate, and let's have it end at about 15 seconds. And we'll rotate this. We'll set this exactly to minus 180 manually. All right, so we're going to start playback here. Actually, we'll start playback a little bit before, and I'm bringing the preview window into place so you can see what happens. So again, I just established beginning and ending points. At the beginning, it's here, and in the middle, Vegas automatically creates all the in-between motions, and ends up 100, after flipping around 180 degrees. So there's a complete, little project with a background and an imported clip that was synchronized to an audio track, and there's the whole thing. The checkerboard fades in, starts to rotate, then the banjo fades in. Maybe we'll have it come in a little sooner. I'll also mention that the colors you're seeing are not true, and this is an artifact of the screen capture program. I have, obviously, I'm looking at all of this in 32-bit color, but apparently the screen capture program reduces everything down to 16 bits, or maybe even only 8 bits, and that's why the colors look blocky. But normally all this stuff would be very, very clear, very smooth color transitions. There's one more thing I'm going to show here, which is the use of masks. Sometimes there are blemishes here. For example, and you can zoom in. I'm using the scroll wheel here to zoom in. Some of our earlier shots, this was kind of dark. There was a shadow there. We weren't careful with the placement of there's two green screens, one in the back and one on the floor. And there would be dark blotches that were impossible to get rid of because they weren't really green. They were too dark. And if you come down here to the mask, and you can draw things out. You can just draw from here to here to here to here. And it assumes that that what you're masking this is what I want to show, but in fact I want to make this a negative mask. And so even if there was, even if there's a blemish or something on the green screen, that you can hide that, and that's completely blocked out. On some of the guitar and bass parts, I was so wide because of the way I was facing, this little area of floor, this little bunch of a green screen showed, so I would just create a block around there and just make that a negative. And then that completely got hidden, and that's very useful. And these can also be animated. If I had to block something out right next to my elbow and my elbow was moving, select the entire path. Again, these are all right-click options here. And I can just grab that here and put that right up against the elbow. And then if my elbow moves, or if I need to move it, I can move this a little closer. And now as we play, this moves around and tracks my arm and goes up and down and in and out. And I have some pretty complicated things on some of the video clips to get rid of shadows here, where you could see little bits of shadow. So I'd actually literally draw and I'm going to do it crudely now, but I would zoom way in and do a really fine detail and put this here. And if I happen to move my feet, I could move this as needed and create a mask around here. And again, I'm just doing this really quickly now. Make that a negative mask. And now all the little shadows and blemishes and dirt around by my feet would be completely hidden. And again, here's what shows on the screen. Yeah, we can make one checkerboard blue and the other one red. And that's what that looks like. And that's maybe not a great color combination, but that's how it works, and they can change over time. So there you have it, a complete little mini project with a clip synced to video, and in the background that moves and changes colors, and then you just go over here and you hit save, and you have it, and you work on it over a year. So now let's look at a real project, and we'll use the Cello Rondo video and just look at some of the tracks and some of the things that might be interesting in there. I'll do this fairly briefly and show more detail in the television section. When we look at that video, I knew more when I got to that, and some of the editing is a little more sophisticated. So here's the main screen. You zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. The mouse wheel is very useful. If you hit Control, the tracks go up and down. If you hit Shift, the time goes left and right, and without either, it zooms in and zooms out. You'll notice a lot of little markers here, marked beat, and these are where the downbeats are, and that was from when I was synchronizing the video clips to the original soundtrack. And again, I put the soundtrack way at the bottom here because I don't really need to get to it too much. There's also what I call half bright, and there's a adjustment on all of these clips for how bright they are. They call it opacity on the clip. On the track, it's called composite level, and it's like a volume control, but it's a brightness. And there's also envelopes to fade out. A lot of times, there are overlays in this video. There's an overlay here at about a minute, and there's two players, and there's a larger player, kind of bowing that drone note, and he's not full brightness, so he doesn't block the other players, and that way I can show three people on the screen in the size of two. When I first did this, I did it as a standard television format, 4:3 aspect ratio, and then I later made a widescreen version. We're actually looking at the widescreen version here, but I'd already set this up, in order to be able to squeeze three people into the space of two. And that's done with the composite level. And this is track composite level, and so it comes in kind of dim, and these are envelopes that you put in, and so it starts at 35% brightness, goes up to 45, stays there, and then comes down again. And that just sets how bright that is on the screen. This is a velocity, which is the speed that it plays back, so you can do slow motion or fast motion. And in this case, when I played that long bow, I didn't hold it for long enough, so I actually have the clip start at normal velocity, and then partway through it actually goes in reverse, and you can see it says minus 65%, so it actually plays backwards. So I draw the bow to one end, and when I actually recorded it, I drew the bow to one end and stopped, but in this case, the bow goes to one end and comes back again, because I actually reversed the speed. So that was kind of a clever trick to get around the fact that they didn't play it well enough. Here I have this background, which is really just a SoundForge screen cap, and that's a background, so that's going to be on one of the lower tracks. Let's scroll down and find it. There it is. And this is just an imported clip I brought in, again using pan and crop automation. And as I drag the time slider down here over the duration for which this clip stays on screen, you can see how it pans across. And again, the little box that's moving is the display screen. So even though we're moving the box to the right, that actually makes the image scroll to the left. And I just simply set that up. Here's the initial position is at this end, and by the time it gets over to here, it's at the other end, and it in SoundForge scrolls smoothly as that goes, and then it doesn't scroll anymore. And I'll also mention the preferred format for visuals, if you're going to bring in static images like this, the best format is probably PNG files, portable network graphics, PNG. And it's best if you size them originally to the size of a screen. In this case, it'd be 720 by 480 for a widescreen, or 655 by 480 for a standard television video. And that way, you get fewer artifacts, because Vegas doesn't have to squeeze things and drop pixels or repeat some pixels. I remember when I did this, I sized SoundForge so that its window was exactly that size, and did a little bit of trial and error until I had that window exactly the right size, and that's why it looks pretty clear in the final video production. I also did some panning on the noise background at 126. The noise background is dim. You can see the brightness is only 42%. So even though it looks fairly bright here, and again, this is a noise pattern. It's one of Vegas's built-in patterns. But because it's dim, this is really what it looks like. And it's a background. And again, just for interest, when I play this, let me play the clip. And you can see it just kind of sweeps across to the from left to right, just to add a little bit of interest. You can do it with pan and crop or with track motion. I'm doing it with the track motion. It not only goes to the right, but it also changes size, and that just adds interest. So it's not just moving in one way, but it's also changing its size and shape and position on the screen. It just adds interest. Another thing I'll mention, with a video production like this where there's a lot of video clips, it takes a long time to render. I forget how many hours it was, I know, to render the final version of Cello Rondo, but right now the Tele-Vision takes 12 hours to render at normal quality, and if I do the 2-pass, it takes 24 hours, and I think this was probably like half that. But that's a long time. And when there are many, many clips happening with effects and green screen and brightness and contrast and track motion, the video preview window just cannot possibly keep up. In fact, I'll play it here. And you can see it's very... you can see it's not real-time motion at all. It's going jumpy. Now, there is a preview quality, and if you go to draft mode, it looks pretty blocky, but at least it can keep up a little better, and you get more like, 2 or 3 frames per second. But the quality is pretty poor. There's a really, really nice feature in Vegas called Render to RAM. And of course, you could also highlight a little section and save it to a file. But even easier than that is you highlight the section and you hit the Shift-B key. And you can, depending on how much memory you have in your computer and how much you tell Vegas and its options to set aside, I have a gigabyte set aside in my current computer just for RAM renders. And you highlight 10 seconds or maybe 3 seconds, just a transition or a little part of something. And that might take, a minute and a half to do that 2 seconds. But then you can see it in the full quality right there without having to write files and save files and go into a media viewer. So that's a very useful feature, is to pre-render little pieces. And again, just at transitions, there's a transition where this background crossfades into this background. So you can just highlight that and just hit Shift B. And there's not a whole lot happening in this video, so that did it. And now I can play that at the full quality. But there are parts in Tele-Vision where it takes literally, 10 minutes to render 10 seconds. It's about 60 to 1 a minute per second that it takes. But at least you can do it, and you can go pour a cup of coffee, and when you come back, you have at least something to look at. And there's a kind of a spotlight that sweeps across the screen. That's a white exclamation point that I just made not real bright and just moved around the screen. Here's the top of the exclamation, and the little dot is up here somewhere. So this is all very crude. And the same thing with the halo over bear, which I spent hours animating. That's just the letter O stretched out a little bit, colored gold. Here's the swirling, and this was done with the checkerboard pattern, which I showed earlier, but set to make stripes by having, because you can say how many bars do you want vertically, how many horizontally, and if you make horizontally 0 or just 1, then you get just stripes. That swirling effect was done with the swirl plugin, and again, this is automated, and you pick the center of where the swirl is to be, and the amount. So I have it start at the beginning of this clip with 0. And over time, it automatically, I set it here, but 2-3 seconds in, 2.5 seconds in to be 100%. And then it goes back again. And that's why it swirls to the right and gets tight, and then it opens up again. There's a lot of plugins. There are all kinds of plugins. There are a bunch of presets in all of these plugins. When you look at these here, there's just lots and lots of really cool things that you can do. And I can't show you everything here now. I think the last thing that's worth looking at here that was clever in this video, there's an oval cutout where I rattle the pencil between the strings, and that shows through as a kind of a window. And that's done with parent-child tracks 3 and 4. And you can see that 4 is nested. And this is done by defining in this case, a circle, which I bent into an oval shape. And that sets the pattern for which the lower track shows through. The example in the Vegas Help is really quite complicated, and they show flame borders coming through. I thought that was a pretty cool effect, that one window shows through another. And also, as I think I mentioned in the director's commentary, all of these backgrounds, all of these pieces were created using Vegas tools. This is probably a letter Z. This is an ASCII character, not a letter O, but it's a solid character, just used from the symbol font. The clouds here is the noise pattern. There's a lot of presets on the noise. I use the noise a lot. So that's our brief look at Rondo, and next we'll look at a little more at some more advanced things that I did in television. So here's Tele-Vision in Vegas, and this has a lot of tracks. If we scroll down here and look along the left, there's 39 tracks. So the bottom two are audio. This is the play-along version without leads, and this is the real track. I actually ended up setting up the play-along version as an alternate soundtrack on the DVD, so it's muted here, and it's not really needed in this project. But there's the one audio track and 37 video tracks. Because the order of tracks in Vegas determines where what things are in front, I typically have the titles and text objects in the front, and then the clips here. The first thing is what I call the transporter, and it was kind of inspired by Star Trek when people would be beamed in. This is the lead guitar character, his first entrance, the guy in the jacket. And this is actually several things. There's the purple column that comes down, and it has a little wiggle to it. And there's also this kind of snowy thing in the middle, which is the noise plug-in, a noise generator. And that expands and opens wider. And then I'll find a place where he's just partway down. This actually is the checkerboard, made up of red and blue, but not checkerboard, but just columns. And these are all the parameters, and these are the two colors picked, the red and the blue. And I use track motion here to have it come down. Track motion, unlike the pan and crop that kind of works in reverse, this works normal. So here he starts at the top, and then over time that thing descends, and that's the blue and red column coming down. Then there's the snow portion, and that also has some automation. And I have just a narrow column here. I'll zoom in. There's just a narrow little strip, and it widens as I come towards this point. And again, you only define the start and end points. It starts here, and over that half a second or so, it opens up and gets wider, and that's the noise. And here we're seeing it at the full width. And the last thing is a combination of more noise and the player. And the idea was to have them kind of materialize from thin air. And that also was done with a parent-child. But the noise controls how much of this leaks through, just like in a rondo where I had a circle and I stretched it to be an oval. And that controlled how much of the pencil rattling between the strings shows through. In this case, the noise controls how much of the player shows through. The player also fades in. You can see here's the fade-in part right around here, and you can control how long it fades in over. This is actually a static clip with the velocity or speed, the playback speed, set to 0. So what I meant to do was to stand still as I was waiting to start playing and then become more animated, and I forgot to do that. So I just grabbed literally a single frame and froze it, and then it becomes the animated person over here. Let's beam me up, Scotty. There's a slide guitar overlay. And again, that's one of those. It's not full brightness. You can see my jacket through this overlay, but notice how it's a little fuzzy here. There are blur plugins. There's one called Gaussian Blur that will blur an image, and I use that various times. But I didn't want to blur the detail. I just wanted to blur the edge so it wasn't such a sharp line. And I couldn't find a plugin that did that. But what I ended up discovering that was actually worked out very cool is the chroma key plug, which is normally meant for the green screen, which I'm using anyway. And if you do the blur, it just blurs the edges. So in this case, it gave a nice a blurred effect just to the box that surrounds the player. I should also mention, this is a fabulous slide. I got this slide from Jeff Roberts, who owns Latch Lake Music, latchlakemusic.com, and he actually gave me that. He's a friend of mine, and that's a fabulous slide, and really worth mentioning because it's better than the thin bottles and glass bottles and thin metal. It's very, very heavy, almost like a steel guitar slide. Really has a lot of sustain, and that's very important for slide guitar, especially the kind of playing I did here where a single note might have to hold for 5 seconds as I slide around up and down. Let's see, next interesting section here is the cowboy, which was done with 2 cameras. We used 2 cameras several times in this piece. Here's the main character, and this is a close-up. And this was not done by blowing that up because it would be grainy and pretty low quality, even though it's only half bright. And again, here you can see the edges are softened up with the chroma key blur. So this is actually two cameras because I wanted it to be perfectly in sync. I didn't want to play it twice and hope that I moved my fingers exactly the same. So that was done with two cameras, and there are other places that are done with that. There's a close-up in the cello and piano section where I'm playing the piano, and there's a close-up, and that also was done with the second camera simultaneously. In the guitar quartet section, there's a bass player, and he spins around, and it turns into the guitar player in the middle. That was done with two different techniques at the same time. They're cross-fading, and you can see that one track fades out just as the other one fades in, but there's also track motion on both of these. So one spins as he comes in, and the other one spins as he comes out. And these are markers, and obviously these identify all the sections. And one thing that's really nice, when you have markers in a project, when you export the project and render it to the final video, there's a checkbox here to save the markers in the media file. If you do that, DVD Architect will automatically make chapter markers there, so you can use the Next and Previous button on your DVD player's remote control, and the chapters are already marked. And even though it doesn't say that anywhere in the DVD menus, you can try that, and you'll see that you can go from section to section. And that's useful in the play-along version if you want to skip over the cello and piano part. One interesting thing I did was at one point there's a bird that flies overhead. And I actually used two things. I used track motion to move the bird across the screen. It's just a static photo, but it looks like he's changing the angle. And I did that by sizing the image in the pan and crop. And there are options here for lock the aspect ratio. And if I lock the aspect ratio, then as I changed it, the bird would just get bigger or smaller. By keeping those independent, I was able to move the bird and change its, and you can see how it's changing its size and its shape as well as its size. So that's what makes it look like it levels out and then goes uphill again and goes upward, and this is what happens over time. And this is independent of the track motion, which is what actually moves it across the screen and gives it that shadow effect. There's a little shadow under Bear, there's a little shadow under my feet, under the piano, and I have that pretty much everywhere in every track. But in this case, I moved the shadow and made it distant, so it looks sort of like it's on the ground, even though all this is happening up in the sky. And that's done also with the track motion. And here you'll look at this whole track motion section. There's a position, which is where you place things, and there's 2D, two-dimensional shadow. And there's also a glow, and I'm not using glow here, but glow is definitely used in other tracks and other players. I should mention, during the screen capture process, some of the double-clicking doesn't seem to work. Normally, I would just double-click this, and the track motion would come up right at that point in time. And that's not working, so I'm having to come over here and hit the track motion button, but it always comes up at the beginning of the track, which isn't really what I want. I want to just double-click this and have the cursor right at the right point. But this is at 3 minutes and 48 seconds here. So we'll bring the track motion up, zoom out, come over to that part, and here's where the shadows are defined. And this is a very far shadow, and this is how far the size of the shadow, the offset, X and Y, X is horizontal, Y is vertical. So in this case, it's to the right some amount, and it's below a negative number. And you can see it's a fairly large offset. You can also just grab this, and that changes the numbers over here. You can change the numbers here, and that changes that. So that's how I got a very distant shadow that looks like it's far away. And I have presets for a lot of this. For the regular players, I have shadow and no shadow. I also use temp a lot. When there's 8 violin players on the screen, I'm going to do the same kind of thing to all 8 of them. I'll figure out what it is, and then I'll save that as a preset. Okay, this is how much shadow I want for here. And I have presets, and I just always call them temp because I don't need it as permanently. I don't want to wade through 75 presets. This is what I'm working on right now for the next 20 minutes. And then I can just call that up and go to the next track and call up that preset. So that is a very efficient way to work. You can also see remnants of the rainbow here, and I did this with a couple of tracks Here there's some orange and yellow, but the rainbow, of course, also has blue. So I had to create 2 of them. This is just a parentheses. This is just an ASCII text, very primitive, but it works well. And I added what they call as Gaussian blur, and that just blurs everything. And you can even blur the different colors and the intensity of brightness separately. And there's a bunch of presets, and it looks sort of like a rainbow. I spent a huge amount of time on Blinky's eyes, and Blinky is the Simpsons character. And if you're a Simpsons fan, you know that episode where they discover the 3-eyed fish in the radioactive river. And this was a picture I also got off, I forget where. I've had this for a long time. I have a lot of Simpsons pictures. I should be embarrassed to admit it, but I'm not. And in order to figure out how to do this, I actually had to go to find that episode in The Simpsons that had that episode when Blinky first made his appearance, and look to see how did they animate the eyes. And I'm going to make this as wide as I can right here, so I don't have to keep showing the preview window. And these are individual frames. I spent a half an hour or an hour taking this, and then I made a version where the eyes were just barely closing in that color. Then they're closed a little bit more, and a little bit more, and then almost completely closed. And then it opens completely, and then it goes on to the next eye and closes a little. And notice I just have a little bit of shading here. Even though this is very quick and small, this is much smaller than in the actual Simpsons episode, but I wanted to be at least as true as I could to that, and then goes through the same thing with the third eye. And that the whole thing took me, like, as I recall, about 3 hours to do all that, to capture the picture and edit the picture and strip them all in. And then it goes back to the solid picture for a second and a half, 2 seconds, something like that. But at the funk section here, let's find where that starts here. The band, as you know, drops into place from the ceiling or above the ceiling as the classical guitar is fading out, and all these players drop down perfectly in sync and in position with the guys in the front and the guys in the back and the guys behind that. That was all done with track motion. I'll just show you one of the tracks, and here's the rhythm guitar player. There's 2 rhythm guitar players. This is the guy on the left. So I started actually at this point. I said, okay, a quarter second, whatever, before the band actually starts playing. Because every single one has a point here and a point right at the beginning of the clip, a motion point. And this is the final position right there. Everybody is in position. And here's the same thing up at the top. And I just did this manually. If you click on this thing and hit the down arrow key, or up and down arrow keys, you can move it in tiny, tiny increments. So I just adjusted that until the bottom of that guitar player, the bottom of his feet, was just barely visible, just off the top of the screen. And that's right at the very beginning of the clip. So when the clip first starts, and then it comes over time, and he drops down. And I just used markers and set the exact same point for each of the tracks. I also spent an awful lot of time, more time than I probably should have, on animating the disco floor. And that was really quite a project. The floor itself is a checkerboard. And there's a backdrop, which is just a solid, very dark red that's happening back here. And doesn't come, it only comes down this far. And I blurred the edges so it wouldn't, so you don't see sharp lines. But I wanted to have all those squares light up, and you'll notice that the squares, and in fact, let me just solo that here. Solo that background and solo the image. And you can see it's not square, it's all angled, and that's done with the deform plugin that lets you squeeze things, and you can squeeze them and change the angle. In this case, it was done to make it seem like there was some depth to it, and like this is farther back than this. But that meant that every one of those lit up colors as the floor lights and goes around in circles and does different things. Those all had to be shaped. And I needed one to fit into each of these. So I actually made a little pool of different parallelograms, all pre-shaped, and I would just drag them from the pool, drag them into position, set the color to whatever I felt was a good color for that. And so when I had these things going in a circle, and I had 2 of them, I would have one here, and then I would move, put one over here and one over here, and then next one would be here, and that would come over to there, and so forth. And that took me days. I spent days on that. Soloing is useful because, as I was saying before, when you try to play these things, it can't keep up. When you have 7 characters, all with chroma key and lots of plugins, and you try to play it, it won't play in real time. But I can probably get this even in the high quality preview mode. And you can see they dance around, more or less in real time. But if I had all the players on there, Vegas just couldn't possibly keep up. There'd just be too much activity, too much computation. And a very clever feature is if you hit Control when you hit a solo, it just unsolos everything, and they all the tracks come back. And now we're back to another thing that I think is interesting, and hopefully you think it's interesting too, is the Max Headroom backgrounds I did. There's two of them. There's this one, which is fairly simple. And I actually created this from lines in an engineering program I use called Visio. So here you can see in the pan crop window. And I just created that, just a bunch of white lines on a transparent background so that I could then deposit this over any color background I want. So that's the basic pattern. There's also this version here that I used colorizing plugins to fatten it up. And the whole thing then rotates in a 3D using track motion. I think at this point you understand how the track motion works. This noise pattern here behind the California Rock section is also, that's noise. That's one of the plugins here, and they have a lot of presets here. All kinds of really cool things. A pattern that looks like wood. I used a lot of these in the Cello Rondo. I used pretty much everything that's in here at one point or another, especially towards the end of Cello Rondo. It's just one noise pattern after another. One thing that was really cool that I mentioned in one of the commentaries was turning blue shirts into red, because the intent was to have the slide whistle guys have blue shirts and the singers have red shirts. I forgot to change shirts. And that's really a very cool plugin. It's called the Secondary Color Corrector. And you can see here that this is a slide whistle guy, and I'll make this as big as I can in this window. Actually, I could make them even bigger here. And again, here's the use of those masks. Here you can see there's some black things happening behind there that I needed to block out. And so the original clip has red shirts, but in the video itself, I'm wearing a blue shirt. And that's done with the Secondary Color Corrector, and that is an extremely cool plugin. There is what they call the eyedropper that lets you sample the color that you want to change or do something to. And you can rotate the hue. So in this case, I picked red, and I wanted to rotate it through blue. And again, it's hard to show all of this at the same time in the preview window as I move this. But basically, I picked the color red. I picked the tolerance because some parts of the red shirt are darker than others. Here it's dark under here, and it's lighter up here. So I had any red that fell within that range of dark red through light red, but not so light that it affected my face in the skin tone here. So you pick the range, high red, the brightest part you want, the dimmest part, and then you change that and you rotate the colors, and that's what you get. There's also a lot of what's called transitions. In fact, rather than show you the transitions I did, I'll just show you here in their audition window. When you have two tracks, one overlaps another, whether it's on the same track or different tracks, you can control how they move. And there are a lot of them. This is the 3D blinds category. As you hover over with the mouse cursor, it shows you what it does. And there's a 3D cascade. I mean, there's many, many, many different ones. There's barn door. Then they show you the A and the B clip. And there's just tons and tons of these. And of course, you can go in and you can edit these parameters. Here they have the yellow line, here they have black lines. But when you actually call up one of these presets, you can control everything. So those are really just showing all the presets they have. Here we have an iris pattern, and there's two irises happening at the same time. One is these guitar players on the left and right transition from one to another. This is the part where all three guys are wearing the white turtleneck shirts, and it goes into a different kind of a lead part. And then a couple of seconds later, there's a different iris transition, and that's this one here, where this background with the snow scene in the back, and there's a big transition there. So that's an iris that's on the background, as one background goes from another. If we call up the transition property, you can see besides all the presets that they have, circle out coming from the center, a diamond shape, rectangle, you can control every one of those, and you pick the basic shape. And whether it comes in or goes out, and feathering, which is a softening of the edges so you don't have a hard edge, and that's around here. I just want it to be a little softer. If we say no feathering, you can see it's a very hard edge, and if we add more feathering than I have, even softer around there. So you control all of those things in the properties windows. One of the things that I really like is the dancing musical notes, which, as I mentioned in one of the commentaries, was actually done to hide those shadows behind the green screen. And this is just a solid color trimmed, cropped here, and placed right here. And the notes are actually a font I have called Anastasia font from the music publishing program I use called Encore. So you can go right in, you can grab an 8th note or 16th note or different notes. And I just animated them and had them, go up and down and march across the screen. I soloed just the notes, and I made them kind of a gold color, the blue background, and maybe this is enough that it can keep up. And that's just done with text fonts. And you can see all the animation here. They call this horizontal shear, and it's 0, and then there's minus 100. It stays at minus 100 to here, then it goes back to 0. Stays at 0 for a while, then switches suddenly to plus 100, and that's why they lean back and lean forward. And there's just a whole pile of them. Of course, once you do one block, you can highlight a bunch and then use Shift and then just Control drag, and you drag the whole pile, and you can stick them wherever. And here's what they're hiding. Now, this was actually before I learned about these masks. And this mask feature where you can do this, and I would have, although the problem is when you have something like this, and as I drag this, you can see the motion. The legs. If you're moving your legs a lot, you have to keep moving the mask. In this case, this character is not moving around too much. Though if I had a problem around here, I'd have to keep moving it. And believe me, there's plenty of that. Later on, after I learned about the masks from the Vegas Help Forum, a lot of expert help there. I put that there just to get rid of the kind of dark shadows under the feet. All this here is all nice and clean, but the original video, there's all kind of smudgy looking dark shadow stuff under the feet. The later video where I had better lighting didn't have so much of that, but it's really difficult. Usually when you see green screen stuff in music videos or on TV news or whatever, it's not a whole person standing on the floor. It's usually just the upper half of somebody's body. And that's a lot easier. The problem is getting even lighting. And even though I bought professional lighting, which doesn't mean I know how to use it, but even though I bought a lot of professional lighting, it was still hard to get rid of. You can see the shadows here. So there you have it. So this is a whole bunch of tracks and a whole lot of work to turn it into this. And I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I had fun doing it. All right, and finally we get to looking at the audio tracks for these productions in Sonar. And before we start, I want to make a point here. Listen to this. And now listen to this. I've set up the solo buttons in Sonar so that they're grouped, but one was on and one was off when I put the group together. So this is an easy way to toggle between two tracks for A-B comparisons. The first track is the final mixed and mastered version of Tele-Vision, and the lower track, number 2, is my mix but without any plugins, no reverbs, no sends, no buses, no echo, no EQ, no compression, no nothing. The point I want to make with this is that mixing modern pop productions is really as much about sound design and sound sculpting as it is about balancing levels and making one instrument louder and softer than another. And when we look at at some of the details of these productions, you'll see some of the severe EQ and other effects that had to be done. Not only EQ, but compression and reverb and ambience. Ambience is the same as reverb, but with a shorter time, and it gives the effect of instruments and players being right there in the room with you, as opposed to a big wash of cathedral-type reverb. And just along these lines, let me just play a couple other pieces just so you can hear the extreme differences here. And the differences are even more pronounced in a Cello Rondo. Much more sound sculpting was needed, very severe EQ to take 37 different tracks of a single physical instrument and make them sound different, and some sound full and some sound clear. And here's a few segments from that. You can hear it's all the same instruments, all the same notes are being played. Everything is exactly the same, except one sounds, I think, pretty exciting, and the other sounds really dull, boring, and lackluster. And hopefully we'll be able to see in this final section how you can get your mixes to go from this to something more like this. All right, and here we are looking at the tracks in Rondo. I actually prepared a special 720 by 480 version of this. This is one of the toughest things I ever mixed because it was the same physical instrument used for lots of different sounds, and there's really a lot of severe equalization used on this. And we'll just look quickly at some of these things here. Here's the, I also gave these kind of funny names: tinker, brusher, thumper, bonker, slipper. Here's the tinker part. And this has some fairly severe equalization here. Without it, and you can hear a lot of funking. If you're going to use equalization like this, especially boosting the high end, it's very important to have a very clean recording. I recorded all of the parts in a Cello Rondo with a single Audio-Technica 4033 microphone, and it was fairly close mic'd. I really wanted a pop sound. I wasn't looking for a big classical music sound. So the microphone was about a foot away from the cello. I call this the brusher, and this is where I'm scraping the strings with the bow. And this also has a lot of EQ, really severe. And this is what it takes. Here's how terrible it sounded without the EQ. And maybe the reverb and ambience mudded up a little bit. And that's a lot of times what you have to do to make stuff come out. And the thumper is, the thumper of course is the kick drum part. There's very little reverb. It's way down at -22 and just a little bit of ambience. But here's the raw recording. And it's really way too resonant. And again, lots and lots of really severe EQ. So all of that equalization really tightens it up and actually makes it sound like something. The cello bass has a lot of processing on it and a lot of compression, and maybe this is a good point worth talking about compression generally. Just to hear the difference. Equalization is cutting out around 300 hertz here, which is kind of that boxiness. And the compressor is an automatic volume control and makes notes sustain. And this is a fair amount of compression on this. Every time this meter comes down, that means the volume is being reduced. There's a little man inside here that sees when things are loud and turns the volume down. And then as the note fades out, it turns the volume back up. And this here shows how much the volume is being reduced by. If you can hear the difference. And that adds a lot of sustain and power to the bass. It really makes it sing out longer and not sound quite so wimpy. That's like a kind of a conga bongo drum kind of a thing. And again, I'm getting rid of a lot of the mid-range honkiness at around 850 hertz. And bringing up some of the slap part with the high-end boost. It's not too severe, though there's a fairly severe cut, and you can really hear that working. And again, I have compression in here, which evens out the notes and makes it sound just a little more polished. So compression is quite a staple of recording tools, as is equalization. And here's without any effects. You can hear it's just a little clearer. I have in this case, a mid-range boost and a little bit of low-end boost here. But the 3 kilohertz is a high mid-range treble, really, and it just makes it clearer. And the reverb and ambience give it presence and life. Some of these chords just can't be played by one person at a time on the cello. I have that, and turn this one off so you can hear these upper two. And then bring in the low note. When you watch the video, it looks like I'm playing it all at once. And it's the magic of recording technology. Plink duet would be the pencils on the cello in mid-range boost, just to make that come out clearer. Let's solo that. So it adds a lot of mid-range there, and of course the reverb. Ambience is a very important effect. It's really just reverb. And this is on a bus. It's just reverb, but it's very short. And I'm going to just turn that on and off so you can really hear the difference with that. That sounds a little like a bathroom, and that's actually kind of a lot of ambience. I don't usually put that much on tracks. It just gives it a sense of being in the room there with you. And let's do that again with a little less, a little more realistic amount. As opposed to reverb, which is like an auditorium, gymnasium kind of effect. I remember when I recorded that, and I did that one note at a time. In the video, it looks like I'm playing it as a chord, 2 notes at a time, but I did not really do that. There's this note. And this note. And a ton of echo on there. This is panning automation here so that this cello goes from the left to the right as it goes across as it plays. And the sol ponticello is a technique where you play very, very close to the bridge, and it has a very thin sound. This is volume automation, where the volume fades up, holds for a little bit, and fades down. And yes, the right way to do that is you're supposed to do it by playing it that way. And if you look at the underlying waveform, you can see I did play it that way. It gets louder and softer, but I goosed it and exaggerated that even more with volume automation, so it gets even louder than it was. So yes, the cello playing starts off soft and gets loud, and then I exaggerate that. Again, a severe low-end roll-off. Everything below 300 hertz is rolled off again, so it doesn't clutter up the bass playing and everything else. Here's without the equalizer. And you can hear all that rumbling in there, and that rumbling is just noise. It just doesn't contribute to anything. And I can't emphasize enough that's a very common mix technique. It's used all the time in pop music production, rolling off the bass frequencies on anything that doesn't really need it. Here's part of the rhythm. And again, you can see this is made up of 3 different notes here to make these chords. I played them one note at a time. Well, yeah, so this is a 2-note chord. So this is two notes here, and these are individual notes probably. And then bring these in too, and I wish I could have played it all at the same time, because it could have been possible, but there's this droning part. And that's called a pedal tone in music theory talk, because organists would play that kind of a drone with their foot on the pedal. So that could have been played with the thumb, and this could have been played with fingers, and that's the way I mimed it when I did the video, but really it's separate pieces. Without the severe equalization, getting rid of a lot of resonances and getting rid of all this low end, bringing up the mid-range. It sounds truly dreadful, and that makes it much, much clearer, makes it sparkle, and then you add the compressor, it smooths it out even more. And there you have it. There's some highlights in the mixing of a Cello Rondo, and how I got from what you heard at the beginning of this segment, when it was with no plugins, to all plugins. A lot of time, a lot of care, a lot of effort, a lot of concentrating on one track at a time. And I know that many famous mix engineers say, oh, you can't solo tracks. You have to listen to the whole mix, how it works together. But, you have to solo tracks. It's the only way you can really hear where the muddiness is coming from. And if you solo a track and turn off, especially echo and ambience and reverb and stuff, you can better focus on what you're doing. And then you can just hone in on each thing. And finally, we get to looking at some of the tracks in Tele-Vision. The click guitar intro, this little part here at the beginning. And notice the echo automation here, where it's turned off. And then it comes back on. And I have this set up on the send rather than the return, so that when this note comes along, it doesn't create an echo, no matter what echoes are happening before. The little arpeggios here. There's an equalizer, a wah-wah, and a delay all happening together here. Without the wah-wah, it's just... And the EQ is also fairly extreme here, as I recall. A huge amount of roll-off and a couple of resonant peaks to really stand out a lot. You'll see that there's an awful lot of roll-offs on a lot of tracks, everything but the bass and the drums. In fact, even the drums have a fair amount of low-end rolled off. Normally, you'd play the guitar and you'd actually have a physical wah-wah pedal and you'd pump it. I added this after the fact, and I think it works well. One of the nice things about this wah-wah, this is the Sonatus effects package that comes with Sonar, and I use that pretty much exclusively, maybe another plugin here or there. This can work in auto mode, which is what I have, where it just goes at a constant tempo. It can also work triggered. The A means the track is archived, so it's not using CPU time and not reading the files from the disk. And I had mentioned this is a pool of feedback guitars. I spent about, half an hour just playing all kinds of bends and stuff, and standing in front of my guitar amp, pretty much like you can see in the video. And I identified all the notes: low G sharp, regular G sharp, low B. And then I just drew from this pool and dragged it up to the actual whammy track. You can't really see the track names here too well, because again, I had to size the screen way down to get it to fit onto what you can see clearly on a TV set. A lot of buses. In fact, let me just show you the buses I have here. There's the main bus, a bass bus, a vocal bus, I don't even remember what all these names are at this point here. I can widen this up. The guitar quartet had its own bus, string section, and I defined separate reverb for a stereo reverb and reverb that only comes out of the left and only comes out of the right. There's a huge reverb that in the surround mix ends up coming out of the back, but it's really, really big, a huge hall. And I did the same for ambience. Ambience really is just reverb, and if you look at the plug-in here, you can see that it's the same Sonatus reverb that I use for everything else. And I have presets that I made myself, basic reverb and ambience. I contributed those to Sonatus when they were developing this version that eventually got sold to Cakewalk. But you can see the damping and reverb times are very, very low on the ambience reverb. The reason I have separate ones for left, right, and center is when you have an instrument pan to the left, you really don't want some of its reverb coming out of the right unless it's a special effect. Ambience makes an instrument sound like it's right there in the room with you. It's a very small amount of very fast reverb. And when I was doing a cello rondo on the opening tick, 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 I found it very disconcerting that instrument, which is panned to the left, you could hear ambience coming out of the right. And I was determined to not have that problem when I did television. So I actually set up 3 different ambience buses for that. And I also have timed echoes that are timed to a quarter note, eighth note, 32 note, and also what I call echo ambience, which is a very short single echo to simulate a single reflection off a nearby surface. A grand piano in an auditorium is going to have one reflection off the floor, and everything else is going to be much, much farther away. It's just a single echo with a lot of the high end rolled off. In fact, if you look at this, this is one of the really nice features of this echo is that there's filters. You can have a high pass and low pass filter. In this case, I said, anything around above 2.5 kilohertz, just roll it off. So that's those buses. So I set up a guitar left and a guitar right and guitar center track. And there's a lot of guitar tracks for all these things, but I set these up so that the guitar left gets only ambience that comes out of the left, and the same for the other tracks. And there's extra guitar extras here. As I'd add something, I said, well, I need that, but I want a different effect or I want a different kind of a bus. On the guitar quartet, I used a plug-in. It was actually a free VST plugin called a Formant Filter. It's not a particularly sexy interface, but it's a really cool plugin, and it emulates the human vocal tract. I put the clean and slide guitars on their own track. Phil Kramer has his own track, and I'm proud to show that there's absolutely no effects on that at all. I wasn't going to mess with what he did. Though I did use some ambience, and there's quarter note echo. This is the echo send, which I just wanted to come on the tail end of his little notes here. Let's solo this here. His guitar is panned to the right, but I had the echo panned to the left, and it just comes in on that last phrase. Echo and reverb a little bit goes a long way. And when you have a lot of an effect like that, it really takes up a lot of space and really fills out things too much. And it just makes a muddy mess of things. But a single echo here and there is a nice touch. And it also makes it more interesting. It's not just boring and going along the whole time, but you really notice it more when it just comes once in a while. I'm a pretty good guitar player, but I'm not great, and I'm out of practice. I used to be really good a long time ago. So when I recorded this, this was in pieces, and there's a lot of this in a Cello Rondo. And these are the same pieces over and over. I played it until I got one just perfect, and then chopped it up, and the same thing for the other chords. And that's how I was able to get a good sounding track out of a few pieces of good performances. Classical guitar, let's look at that on track 24. I mentioned in one of the commentaries that it was 3 tracks. Actually, it's only 2. There is 3 players at one point. There's 3 lanes in here. There's a total of 99 active tracks in this project, but because of the lanes, I think it's about 120 actual separate pieces. So here's that classical guitar. And the lower part, I'm going to turn off the snap to grid so we can start exactly where we want. Here's the lower part. And I probably recorded these chords separately also and spliced them together and used bounce to clip to get them together. But, I didn't always do that. I can sometimes play. And here's... And this was definitely played all at once. I mean, I can't play that. There is a part where there's 3 of those. We slide over a little bit here. We'll find that there's some sort of volume automation here. And here's 3 guitars all playing 3 pieces. The low part is just a low E. And bring in the middle part. And then bring in all of them. The rhythm guitar, I used an amp simulator, and I might have mentioned this, that I wasn't sure how much distortion I was really going to want on the rhythm guitar, and I didn't want to have to record it, twice. So I recorded with a modest amount of distortion. Here's... And that's what came out of my amplifier. And here's the equalization. And again, the equalizer is just some mid-range mud and a little bit of high-end boost. Nothing too severe. And I did compress it. It's very gentle. If you look at the gain reduction, you can see it's not dropping a lot. I didn't want a compressed sound. I just wanted to even it out. And the amp sim, finally. And this is a great amp simulator. This is, just came for free with Cakewalk. Again, it doesn't have a pretty face, but it has a lot of presets, and it works great. I mean, it has controls for everything you'd want, drive and presence and volume and all this stuff. You'll notice that little harmonics part that the rhythm plays is on a separate track. There's some interesting editing done on the precision bass. One of my flaws as a player is sometimes I tend to cut notes a little short and don't sustain them for as long as I should. I used a technique that's normally used by people that create samples for sample players. Here's a note I didn't sustain long enough. So this little fragment here was actually over here, and that's where the note stopped. I just repeated a bunch of, 3 cycles at a time. And you can hear a little warble here when I solo it. But in the track, you can't tell at all, and it really made a difference to the performance. It really sustains longer, and there's just a little bit of compression here. You can see the gain reduction. It's just a touch. And the same with the equalizer. I don't think I did anything too severe. Yeah, just a little bit of boost at the low end. Speaking of equalization on the bass, a really, really great technique to make a bass part stand out clearly, and this works with vocals too, but I use it on the bass on here, is you boost a little bit, a couple of dB, with a gentle Q, maybe a Q of 1 or so, around 200 hertz, 300 hertz, maybe even 400 if you want more of a mid-range sound, and cut the same amount on everything else. And the way I've set up the buses here, I have all of the basses going to one bus, and there's an equalizer. And there's a little bit of low-end boost, just a little bit, a couple of dB to bring up the bottom. And at 250, I have 3 dB of boost. And all of the bass instruments go through that. There's 5 different bass parts. There's the bowed bass, there's the fretless bass, there's a picked precision. And they all go through the same bus, and they all get that same small amount of boost. The main bus that everything but the bass goes to has a complementary EQ. It has 3 dB of cut with the same Q at that same frequency, and it has a little bit of harshness removal also. And that's one of the techniques that makes the bass really stand out and really clear, and you can hear every note. For vocals, which is actually how I learned that, I used this back in the 70s when I used to do voiceover recording, and you'd have an announcer talking over a music bed, and 1 kilohertz or thereabouts is very good for that. If you drop it just a couple of dB from the music, around 1 kilohertz, and boost 1 kilohertz on the voice, you can have the music quite loud, and yet you can still hear every single word and hear the announcer clearly. So that's a favorite technique of mine, and it's a really good mixing concept. I probably mentioned that I just love the DreamStation synthesizer. It's a complete mini Moog in a tiny, tiny screen. And I think it's better than Mini Moog because it doesn't hiss, doesn't distort unless you want it. It has distortion. And it doesn't use a distortion. And it doesn't go out of tune. It doesn't drift. And it does all the things. And I just love the sound of this synthesizer. And I used this in 2 different places. I used it near the beginning. And that's one of the presets, though I think I changed it a little bit. I probably changed the cutoff frequency. There was a fair amount of work here on the paper deck. The deck of cards that I'm sitting there flipping, and here's what actually got recorded. And adding the reverb makes it sound much bigger. And the delay is a resonant delay. And normally you'd put things like delay and echo on a bus, but in this case I wanted a very resonant effect. There's a lot of crossfeed. It's feedback, but where the left output goes back into the right side and vice versa. It's a very short delay feedback, 6.5 milliseconds delay time. Otherwise it would sound like... So that's just echo. So it's the echo unit's repetition rate that what makes the pitch of what you're hearing. Look at a couple of buses here on the string section bus. On each string track, I boosted different mid-range frequencies to make it sound like different instruments rather than 4 tracks of the same violin. But all together, the strings were a little harsh sounding, so I have 3 different cuts here in the kind of irritating range, and took out some of the sizzle, make it sound a little more natural. And this is generally a good place to cut things if they're irritating. Obviously, you don't necessarily want to cut everything, but when you have things that are too sizzly and too harsh, 2 kilohertz, 3.5 kilohertz, 4 kilohertz, somewhere around there is often a good place to cut on the vocals. I wanted more sizzle and more presence, but you'll see it's a common theme to roll off the low frequencies a lot. One of the tracks I was going to refer to earlier is the Rhodes. So this is actually the MIDI data, and this is the audio track. I use a sample player called Live Synth Pro. It plays sound fonts. Without the ambience or the equalizing or the modulator, it's pretty flat. And it's really bassy. The equalization is really severe roll-off, everything below 400 hertz. I didn't want any of that muddying up the track. And that's a common theme throughout this whole mix. And through it's not only me. This is a common mix technique. There's a lot of compression on that to make those sustain. The slide I used, the brass slide, is a really good slide, but still it would have decayed pretty quickly. Here's without any effects. And the compression is really what makes it stand out. And if you look at the amount of gain reduction, you'll see that on the initial peaks it's reducing quite a bit. This is the California rock guitar players, the Blonde Twins. This was the only thing I didn't record through my Fender amp. I used my Zoom effects box. And this sound really worked well on a tune I did a couple of years ago, but it was just too sizzly and just took up the entire frequency spectrum. So the EQ I added is just to bring out the mid-range and get rid of the lows and highs. With clip automation, these volume changes happen before the compressor, so you also control how hard you're hitting the compressor. This isn't going to necessarily make the track a whole lot louder or softer, but it'll make the compressor work harder. And so that's really a lot of extra flexibility that you can adjust the output volume after the compressor or any other plugins that are inserted on the track. And this happens before the plugin, so it's going to pre and post volume, not having to choose one or the other. On the fretless, I also used the multiband compressor. A multiband is great, and this is a fabulous multiband compressor that in the Sonatus plugin pack. You can control the threshold, the ratio for each of these bands, and you can also pick the crossover frequency you can change. So you can say, no matter what note is being played, you can see all the different curves here, no matter what note is being played, I want about this much energy in this band. I want definitely a lot less at the high end. I want this much energy in this band, and the compressor will keep each band constant. This is quite a powerful feature. I only used it on 2 tracks. I used it on this and also the picked bass in the California Rock part. Also some resonant boosting on the fretless bass, because they're both Fender-style basses, and this is the bass that Phil Kramer made. But I wanted to really get a difference in character as I went from one bass to the other, so you could really hear that it was different. And there you have it. And I hope this was educational and interesting.